Hello everyone, it is, oh god, don't quiz me on this, I think it's a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday the 26th of November, it's in the afternoon, it's 5 p.m. here if you're watching in the UK time of the GMT, and today we are doing, we're doing another event. It's not one of our discipline deep dives today, we're doing an event where we're going to get a particular individual from the games industry. We're going to spend some time with that individual. We're going to try and learn from them. We're going to try and find out all the things that they know about video games so that we can learn it ourselves. My name is Jonas. I am the community and events leader into games, trying to make things like this possible, and also looking after our lovely Discord server. If you're not aware of Into Games and the kind of work that we do, we're a UK-based organisation in which we spend time trying to basically make the industry more accessible, particularly to individuals from lower income backgrounds or under-resourced backgrounds. So really looking at sort of the bridge between education and sector, especially looking at individuals who maybe couldn't get into higher education, were unable to access certain technologies when they were younger, like, you know, simply just not being able to afford a PlayStation 5 Pro can have all sorts of negative ramifications on your ability to work in the industry later on, just in the sense that you're not necessarily able to access those games and the technologies, and this is an industry that really demands that you are up to date, both sort of in your own skills, but in your knowledge and in your references. So we're really looking at those individuals and trying to figure out how we can do more to help them get into the industry. This event is kind of one such thing. We're going to be spending time with an industry individual today, where we're going to share some knowledge, learn quite a lot about their role and their influences and what helped them get where they are today. This is an event that's entirely free to attend. The resource, the video itself will be free to watch later on as well. So just a really great free piece of information, a free resource here for people who really want to learn this sort of stuff. Hello to our live audiences. Hello on the YouTube. I can see you all there. Wonderful to see you all. Hello if you're watching on LinkedIn as well. And hello to you in the future if you're watching the recording of this event. Do they still have Freddos where you live? The guest that we're going to be talking to today is called Del Walker. Del Walker is a 3D character artist in the games industry, and in particular something quite unique about Del Walker is Del Walker's not just talking to us today in this space for this event. Oh no. If you enjoy hearing from Del Walker today, if you like sort of the work that they've done, or you're really keen to learn more from them, and you wished, Jonas, if only there was specifically a format in which I could spend 3 weeks doing live interactive sessions with Del Walker, learning from them in a sort of facilitated learning environment. If you said those words in that order exactly, then oh boy, do I have the perfect package for you. As part of this event is really here to talk a little bit about a sprint course that Into Games has got coming up as well. Sprint courses, they are designed to be quite short, quite sort of like compact courses where you're going to learn a lot in a short amount of time. So in particular, this course is 3 weeks long. You spend several evenings every single week with Del Walker or various other masterclass guests who might know a lot about the same subject. And if you're attending this event, not only will I tell you about the course, there is a link in the YouTube doobly-doo, or you will easily find links up on our LinkedIn page. But for attending this event, you do get a shiny little bit of a discount code as well. If you're interested in this course, you go onto the course. Del Walker will sort of take you through a brief or a piece of workflow, and you get to work together on something that is just for your portfolio. It doesn't go into a project or anything like that. It's just for you. And if you're interested, there's 50% off. You type Del 50 at checkout, you get 50% off. The code works for 48 hours from the recording of this. So if you're far in the future, do you still have discount codes in the future? I don't know. You can head to intergames.courses, and as I said, there's a little link in the YouTube thing below. Del 50. I'll bring that back up a little bit later. But enough from me. Let's get our titular guest up on the screen. Hello, Del. How's it going?
There I am. Hello. Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you wonderfully.
Brilliant.
There you are.
Nice. Yeah,
Thank
nice
you
to
for
be
joining
here.
us today.
I was afraid nobody would turn up, so this is nice to see some numbers.
I can see at least 7 different names in chat, at least,
That's good.
at a minimum. Yeah, there's quite a few people. I could put a number on it, but I don't want to jinx it. But yeah, no, you've definitely we've got a decent audience. So everyone, please give a little wave to Del, a little digital hello. Just to give us the confidence that you are actually all there, and you're not some really clever, intelligent AI bot that I've programmed to make us seem more popular than we are. Which, nice. I know, if I had done that, I'd be surprised at myself, really. Del, thanks for joining us today. So we're going to talk. Basically, we're mainly going to be talking about you. You're the subject here. You're the main event.
Oh, dear.
But in particular, we really want to talk about you and your relationship to video games, your relationship to the industry, and where, sort of looking a little bit at the history that's brought you here today. And yeah, I think just a little bit of chat then about your craft, your expertise, and in particular as well, we're going to sort of open up questions from the audience. So if you're watching this today and you have specific questions for Del about the subject that we're going to be talking about, which, spoilers, is in the title of the video, 3D character modeling for AAA games, then you are free to ask those questions, and I'll do my best to kind of moderate and grab those questions out of chat. What I will say is, if you don't start your question with the word question in big capitals, then it is often hard for me to catch in the really fast flowing bit of chat. And don't ask any questions just yet, because we're going to have we'll start with a little introduction. And then once we're done with the introduction, I think that's a perfect time to launch into questions. Any questions? It's a trick question. I said no questions. Del, let's start a little bit about yourself. Where did you come from? Where did you go? What was your career history, Del Walker?
Sure. So yeah, I actually started. I guess I should start from where I studied. So I started at De Montfort University a long time ago. Now I think I graduated 2010, and so yeah, that was a games course, not that dissimilar to University of Staffordshire or Hertfordshire, where it was one of the earlier courses that was trying to introduce these like techniques that would allow you to potentially go on to get directly into games. But it was roughly that time those courses started to exist. And yeah, so I graduated from that course, but I actually made a portfolio that was almost entirely characters, which I was told not to do, but I did anyway. And I had my first industry experience at a studio that's now defunct, called Blitz Games. They were based in Leamington Spa, and they made, for want of a better term, shovelware. So most of the games we made were, I'm still pretty proud of them. I loved all the games I worked on, but they were games that were not going to win Game of the Year, but they were a really great introduction into like real development. So some of the earliest games I worked on would have been like SpongeBob, and I worked on a Michael Phelps game. Everyone gets really confused when I tell them I worked on a game which is just about Michael Phelps. Um, and the Puss in Boots 360 title, and Epic Mickey 2. So one of the things that people are often surprised about is maybe how many games I've worked on, but the secret is I worked on game studio that were making tons of titles at the same time for very low cost. And I was part of the R&D department, which meant basically it was like a little tax haven where I could get to work on each product at the same time, basically. So yeah, I think it was like each month I would bounce around projects. They're like, oh, we need a bit of your work on this, or we need to be able to work on this. So it was a good opportunity to yeah, work on a lot of titles in a short time. Then I went to work for Sega shortly after that. And the people are often confused. I was like, "Oh, you went to work for App Games." I was like, "No, that's not what happened. What happened was I was like really focused on getting really good at character. I was like, I want to get better at character. I want to get really good at this." So I had an opportunity to work for a new Sega studio. It's now called Sega Hardlight. When I joined, it was called Sega Dorridge because there was a tiny little office in Dorridge, but it's called Sega Hardlight now, and they were based in a farm. I actually had to cross like a sheep's pen to get to work. It was awful. I'm not even making it up. Like I literally had to evade sheep to get to work. And the studio was set up to make best in class PlayStation Vita games, PS Vita. Unfortunately, nobody bought the PS Vita, so all of the big character art game that I was going to work on got cancelled, and it was just like, we're Sega, we should just pump out some Sonic games. So then I ended up just making like loads of Sonic baddies and Sonic the Hedgehog for these app games. Still loads of fun. And then I had an opportunity to go to Splash Damage on a short-term contract, where they needed extra character art for Batman Arkham Origins, which was the single player game was made in Montreal, and the multiplayer disc was made in the UK. I was about to say here in the UK, but I'm not based in the UK anymore. I live in LA now. But yeah, that was my first introduction into AAA, I'd say. And they ended up using some of the assets we made for the multiplayer ended up going in the single player game as well. But yeah, and then I worked on some other stuff. But yeah, that's my intro. If like into games.
I had not remembered or realized that there was a multiplayer aspect to Arkham Knight at all.
Only people who worked on it remember that it exists. But you can go on YouTube and check it out.
No, that's very cool. That's very cool. And then was Warframe part of that sort of you being in a studio that just touched a lot of different projects and you sort of had to jump in on Warframe a little bit?
No. So
all right.
No, that's quite interesting because Warframe had an issue with their production cycle, a big production cycle, because they effectively made a game on a shoestring budget as the studio was about to die. The studio basically had run out of money, and they're just like, let's just make this weird, like, Guyver game. Let's see if we can get it to work. And the game came out, and it had very little content because it's one of the first live service titles I ever saw. Had very, very little content. And it was just, and it had been around long enough that they could like add new characters, and because there was no lip sync needed, etc., and not really advanced like head facial tech, they could make characters a lot faster than maybe other games could. And so they was like constantly pumping out characters, and then as the game increased in popularity, they needed skins for all of the characters, but they had like something like 60 characters. I don't know how many characters they have. They have a ridiculous amount of characters. So they had a problem that they didn't have enough internal character artists to make, skins for everything. So, you have, say, 50 characters and they only 10 skins. That's 500 skins, and you only have 2 character artists internally. So they created a project. They created a Steam workshop that allowed any character artist to potentially make assets and submit it to them. And then if you were successful with adhering to the art the art direction and just looking cool, they would add your asset to the game. And so I created basically skins. They're skins, but they're like full character models that went into the game. And I did that while just as I finished Halo Wars 2, because there was like tons of downtime basically.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. And like that's not an avenue of work that I think anyone talks about, right? Like this idea that, the sort of the community crowdsourcing thing. I suspect it would be even contentious to try and talk about that in this current climate, right?
I don't know, because I think the thing is TF2 did it first. Team Fortress 2 did it so you could submit hats and they could be purchasable. But the reason I'm a big proponent of why it should happen more is there were people who were like from Manila and like Indonesia that were able to submit things, get them in the game, and they would give everyone who submitted successfully into the game a third of every sale. So I get royalties from Warframe. I don't get royalties from any other game you see on that list. This is the only game that pays me every month. Because I have something in, and I think that's a better way to do it, because there were students that were getting their stuff in game. There are people who would never have an opportunity to work in a AAA studio. There's a guy from the Philippines who got tons of stuff in, and he basically funded his entire town in the pandemic. He bought because the exchange rate was so crazy.
Yeah.
He was basically able to like support his whole town. And so I don't know. I think that's probably the way to go. It's like rewarding the modding community.
That's kind of phenomenal. Okay, and then you've got some of the other projects you've heard about are they're not small indie games. I love to make the joke that something like The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is a small indie game, but
It's a humble little thing.
I don't want to gaslight our community. It's not a small indie game. It's pretty big. So you've got a bigger portfolio of work now, and you've kind of got you've got this portfolio and this reputation that allows you to work on these projects. What, I guess, because people are really interested in this stuff from like a career standpoint, right? Like, do you find that to get this kind of work, you're still having to go onto a website and like hand over your CV and your portfolio, and like you're having to go through these very classic stages of job applications now? Or are you existing in this kind of strange liminal state now where it's like sometimes work comes to you, sometimes you're accidentally sat next to someone and they just happen to have a project? Like, what is allowing you kind of in the modern day really to find the work, and are you working on the stuff that you want to work on as well? Like, are you getting to be picky about this stuff? Because I think that's quite fascinating as well, because early on you don't get that choice.
No, you don't. Yeah, it's a phenomenal question actually. So I'm not necessarily handing over my CV or resume for every role anymore. Especially like 2021 when the pandemic hit, and basically there was just an influx in investment into the games industry. Me and my peers, some of us were getting like 6-7 recruiters at a time contacting us like, hey, would you like to come here? And to be honest, it actually got overwhelming, because you're at first you're like, yeah, this is cool, I feel like the hot girl at prom or whatever, but then ultimately it's like it became quite overwhelming, and so much so you can become quite dismissive, because the industry is tumultuous. There are times when there's lots of money flowing, and there's times when there's not. Right now is not the greatest time for the industry. It will recover, as it always will. But 2020, 2021, I had, yeah, maybe even before that. Yeah, just a little bit before that. They tried. I remember there was this guy got in contact with me, and he was just like, oh, we really want to get you on our project. It's like a fantasy project. And I was just like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't really have time. I was busy on Suicide Squad. I was like, oh, I don't really have time. Blah blah. And it was just like, oh, if you could fit in for a chat. And I was just like, I'll see if I can fit something in. And he was just like, I'll try and get back to you. I never got back to him. Anyway, that game turned out to be Baldur's Gate. They tried to get me to be the lead on that project, and I wish to this day I accepted that. Yeah. Even now, I speak to the recruiter, Rowan, and I'm just like, you should have tried harder. but sometimes it comes to you, and sometimes it's a case of you can cold apply. But the most successful way to usually get an interview per se is some sort of connection into the studio. Like someone has worked with you before, or you've done like a mentorship with that person before, or someone can vouch for you. But yeah, for every like, oh, it's great you got to work on this. You know, like I didn't necessarily know that like the Respawn people came to me, the Rocksteady team came to me, but I knew someone who worked there, and I was just like, oh, you know, Dell could be a good fit because he's worked on the Arkham Origins title. Yeah, Naughty Dog, I just cold applied. I was just like, oh, cool, it'll be cool to work there. Send, never thought about it again. I was just like, maybe one day, and then they ended up flying me over to LA. So it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both, but ultimately, it's the portfolio that's doing the talking anyway, in all aspects. You know, whether you're referred, whether you're code applying, or whether you're you know, blah blah blah. You get it. It's the portfolio that matters.
It's the portfolio. And what I want to do, because I do want to get to audience questions, but I want to really just like take a look at your portfolio really quickly, because I think as you know, you are an artist, you're a 3D artist, you're creating characters. I think a lot of work advice, a lot of careers advice really does stem from like the portfolio needs to be right. The portfolio has to show your work, has to show your best work and things like that. And so just really, you know, earlier today, just really loved kind of flicking through this portfolio just to see you've built your portfolio to be a very sort of top-down sort of narrative, I suppose, right? Where the top is either your best or your most recent work or recognizable stuff. But then scrolling back, we get to look at your Warframe work. We get to see you've got some like really cool like cyberpunk-esque stuff going on here. So it's like not necessarily from cyberpunk. And then I guess here we're kind of actually going a little bit more back in time now to earlier projects, earlier things, but still really great examples of like this is the work you were doing when people didn't necessarily know who you were, and people weren't necessarily kind of reaching out and, you know, sort of putting you into things. And yeah, you've got some clay stuff as well, some clay and some 2D stuff here, showing that, you know, it's not all one thing. You know, you've kind of got that breadth of experience that I'm sure must have been helpful in some way.
Yeah, so it's deliberate. So I put my best foot forward the first time you open the site, right? The first time you open my portfolio, I'm trying to show the breadth of my experience. Because I have that. If I didn't have the breadth of experience to show first, I would show my best work first. And I'm not showing all my work. There's a deliberate choice to not like overwhelm people with all my work. In fact, I like the idea of people saying like, oh, I'd like to see more, as opposed to showing everything. And I'm now at the point of my career where sometimes my earlier work is more interesting than my most recent work, because it showcases things that have not necessarily fallen out of favor, but aren't as common, skill sets that aren't as common. So like hand painted textures, I showcased that. Even though this was done like almost 12 years ago. But I showcased that like I can work in very, very limited poly counts, or very, very limited shader uses where it's just only hand painted. And all of these like things are meant to like kind of bolster my foundation, because portfolio really is you should think of it as I don't want to use it's kind of propaganda, but the idea is you're meant to showcase all of you with the idea that the person looking at it is skeptical of you, especially if you don't have experience. So if I don't see fabric in your portfolio, I have to, as a business choice, make a decision. You do not know how to do fabric. If I don't see hard surface, I have to tell myself this person doesn't know how to. So I've now gone into mode of like showcasing a few more of my older things, just to show like just how long I've been doing this, but also show range, and to show that I'm still very passionate about this as a subject. And that can come from like, personal work or work that's not for a game. That actually shows your passion and interest in much more, and initiative, much more than just, oh, I worked on XYZ game. But
Nice. No, I think it really shows, and yeah, there's a really fun sort of breadth and things like that. And I love the breakdowns. I think one thing I've just got to say is I do think this is not a
Hmm.
commentary on the work whatsoever. I do find this kind of nightmarish. The fact that you have to give a face, but the face has to be like fully stretched out,
Yeah,
like
you get used to it.
like something someone's gonna put on. But that's just me. Maybe other people find that incredibly comforting. No, I
Yeah.
love it. I think it's really beautiful. I think it's a really great example, and yeah, you're showcasing a lot of great advice there. Putting your best work first, really showing a spread of different examples and things like that.
Yeah,
Now, I
I
want to move.
actually, oh,
Oh,
sorry to
carry on.
interrupt you.
No, no,
I've
go on.
sent you a link. Maybe you can kick that open. Um, that is, thank you for the Wayback Machine. That is a link to the portfolio I had when I graduated that got me hired.
Oh, this is great. Yeah,
And so
no,
this,
no,
I
no.
like to show students what, because it's hard to convey what got me hired
Mm,
so far in, but they can get to see exactly. None of these links work, but if you scroll down, it's the same format. Um, what I made in 2009 that got me hired.
yeah.
And it was very simple, like series of character art, like and showcasing like a bit more the behind the scenes. So you can see how old that asset was. It's almost like 14, 13 and 14 years old, that that asset. But I still keep it there. Like even now, even though I could be like, oh, I could just show some more Jedi Survivor stuff, or I'm like, no, no, I'm trying to convey a point that I've been doing this for a long time. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I think using the Wayback Machine to look at stuff like that is actually really interesting, and I've never thought of using it in that way. I will keep that in mind. But that is insanely cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
yeah, not bad.
Now, what I'm going to do is before we really should take some audience questions, but before we move on, Del, real quick,
Yes.
you're doing this sprint course with Intergames, and just a quick sort of touch on that, really. So it starts in January, if I remember correctly. So I think like it's not. It's like the first Monday of January, I think,
Hmm.
is when everyone kind of gets together in a call with you. So that'll be Monday, the 6th of January.
Hmm.
And then for the next 3 weeks, there are going to be like 3 or 4 evenings on the weekdays, normally from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. The idea being is that these courses are designed so that if you have a full-time job, you can sort of come home and jump into a session, or you can finish school, university, whatever, and jump into a session. And those sessions are in Zoom, where people will be sat down with you, and you will. I'm assuming, but I think you'll have a sort of a brief, like you'll sort of give people something to create from scratch, and you will create something from scratch as well, showing everyone your process as you go, or teaching kind of everyone like some of the good fundamentals as they go through this project. Is that more or less right? Please correct me on anything.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds exactly right. Yeah, it's not enough time, obviously, to showcase like, here's how you make a character from beginning to end. That's not the point. But what I am doing is I've like created a little like a microcosm of work, and I'm showcasing the process of how I think, and I'm asking people to go along that ride with me, and I will just be heavily critiquing and talking through my workflow, but most importantly explaining the thinking behind each step, because
Mm.
there's a lot of like, maybe you can follow the tutorials like, here's how you make a helmet, blah blah blah. It's like there's so much discussion that doesn't really happen online that I've noticed, that I really want to be like, here is how you need to think about this asset, or before you even start, here are the things that could like elevate what you're doing for each step. So I'm trying to finish it, but I'm trying to do like a full, like an arm, basically, from beginning to end, and showcase like the sculpting process, the topology considerations, and the texturing process. And it will just be 3 weeks of just like, ask me as much questions as you want. I'm going to ask you to do this. If you can fit time, I'd like you to do XYZ. And then someone comes out of it like, yeah, I've definitely leveled up, and I cannot wait to apply this to my own thing. And it doesn't necessarily need to be things that's just entirely character focused as well. The idea is it's really core fundamentals. Um, but yeah,
Nice. No, I think it sounds wonderful. It sounds like it's gonna be a really amazing course, because yeah, you're gonna cover so much that I think just isn't publicly available, or it's conversations that happen in closed rooms, and
yeah,
that
because
this
exactly.
this course becomes the closed room for a bunch of people who might not have access otherwise. So again, if you're listening, if this is something you're really interested in, if this course has piqued your curiosity, please know that you can use this discount code below me, DEL50, capital letters DEL, then the numbers 50, DEL50. If you type those in at the checkout stage, that should take 50% off the entire price. I believe you can also pay in installments as well. I don't have the other numbers off the top of my head, but you can confirm it all by going to the link in the YouTube description. The code works for the next 48 hours, so it'll end at the it'll stop working at the end on the 28th of October, and it's limited to 10 uses because there's only so many spaces on the course as well. So please check that out. That's as much as I'll present that to you all. Please scroll back here if you're like, I'm unsure. And yeah, Del, if you do want to share your screen, by the way, that's absolutely fine. I think you click present at the bottom.
I see.
It'll let you do it, and then I can control the rest. I think Del's got a little bit of a visual asset to go with this, and then we will sit and take some questions. 100%. I will stop talking quite so much. There you go, Del. Yeah, so there's a video showing you there.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly sped up. It's not like this when you actually do the course. But the idea really is to showcase the thinking behind like a very simple asset. So I'll be talking throughout the process and asking you to like make considerations on how construction works, how to elevate something that's meant to be somewhat simple, but you need to convincingly turn something simple into something that's not just believable, but has a lot of gravity, and taking that from sculpt to low poly to texture. And yeah, I'm just hoping that we can kind of get to a place where people come out of it with lessons that they will apply to their own personal stuff. Yeah, that's the idea anyway.
Nice. So I'm pretty captivated actually by this time lapse of making a glove. It looks cool.
Don't be. It's not that great. It's just to get the point across.
It's great to me, the outside. Yeah. No, I love it. But what we'll do is I can't get distracted by this because we are getting questions from our incredible audience who are really patient. But they're also being really curious. So I want to make sure that we get a really good chance to go through some of the chit chat there. So I'm going to put you on the left. Let me start taking some questions. I've scrolled back a little bit in chat. I don't have time to take every question. That's just going to be a fact for today. Right. But what I will say is if you are someone who you have a burning question and it doesn't get answered today in this call, please consider joining the Intergames Discord server. There's a link in the doobly-doo. That server, over 9,000 individuals. Many of those are industry professionals. A few of those are probably 3D modeling or character artists. There is a lot of hunger for knowledge in that server, but even better, there's a lot of charitable sharing where people do answer questions and share their knowledge. Ask your question in there if it doesn't get answered here today. Or just keep emailing hello@intergames and say, bring back Del, and we'll do this again, but probably not for several months. So, be patient.
I'll try and quick fire too, so I'll be quick with my answers.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, we've got loads and loads and loads, but obviously we'll want to make sure we get these answers right. So we'll find the middle ground. First question, I picked Lola. Lola asked the question because you've just looked at your portfolio. Do you recommend making your own website for a portfolio? And if not, what alternatives do you think are best? For example, something like Wix or ArtStation.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to make your own portfolio. There are a few reasons why I like to use my own website. One, I like to be able to just change things immediately and know that there's not a million eyes on it. I can literally be like on a call with someone and be like, yeah, if you just refresh my page now, the NDA stuff will just appear for the next 5 minutes. Or I can like password lock certain sections of the site. So as you become more experienced, you just want much more control. And I like the idea that you're only looking at my art. Don't really like the idea that I'm in a sea of other artists often. I don't suggest that you use Wix. at all. If you have to use a site, use ArtStation. There's nothing wrong with ArtStation. Wix has an issue whereby they don't have local servers in all areas, so sometimes your site can take like 5 minutes to load, depending on where that person is loading it. But in general, doesn't really matter. Use ArtStation, in my opinion, unless you have a special reason.
Nice. Thank you very much for that. And then, actually, the next question is from Lola, but I'm going to reword it just slightly. So Lola asks, what software do you use to make your character art? Most high-end ones made in the industry are not free. But I suppose an addendum to that, right, which is, let's say I wanted to learn 3D character sculpting, and I was on your course, for example, and I don't have any money. Are there options? Can I download anything? What would you suggest? Etc.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's not true that you need to use expensive software. For example, on Suicide Squad, half the artists that were working, all the weapons artists, for example, and half the environment team, and I think one character artist used Blender exclusively, which is free, to do all of their low poly modeling, because it's, they found it better. And we was like, yeah, no problem. ZBrush is the one that's a little bit harder to get around, but they do have trials and they do have subscription services. And if you are part of a course, and you can usually apply for a student version of that too. So maybe ask, if you're on a course, find out how you can get a student version of ZBrush. But you do need these tools, as well as Substance Painter as well. But I think Adobe does a student fee as well, and they're all subscription based. Maybe just use them when you need them. Don't be paying for it when you're like, I don't need to texture right now. Just have that month off. But yeah, Substance, a low poly modeling tool like Maya, Blender, or Max, and ZBrush. I like them trifecta.
Nice. Thank you very much. I hope that helps. And thank you for the questions, Lola. It's very kind of you. The next question is from Leica. Leica says, I know for a character artist, knowing animation and rigging is important, but what are some overlooked skills that will help in studio or perhaps set you apart from others?
Knowing animation and rigging is not really as useful as being really good at character art. So I would be very careful about diversifying your skills widthways rather than making sure your foundations are really strong. So the things that I often see that are overlooked are showcasing fundamentals, showcasing that here is my low poly model and I'm really confident, and here is the topology super clean. Just a simple, here's my topology, it's super clean, that already puts you in front of most people. And I don't think it should be like, oh, what can I, what special skill can I learn that others don't? If anything, I'd say if you can, just do workshops or on how to improve the things you already know. Because it's really about like fundamental.
I think definitely something we hear a lot in the industry is, it's that wide versus deep sort of like, if you're a body of water, where can you go in terms of, do you diversify, which might be good at indie, for example, but when you go AAA, you have a job and you do your job, and you don't really get to diversify a lot. Yeah, so it's but interesting to hear, character art. You definitely want to sort of want to focus in, go deep, show that you can do that. Don't get too distracted with other bits and bobs. Nice. Thank you for the question.
Keep them coming.
Yeah. So we've got this next question is, I'm going to say it's from Dice Spren, but I could be saying that entirely wrong. Dice Spren says, question, what is your best advice for game artists to land their first role after graduating? Certainly a massive topic for sure.
Sure. I've seen a lot of people get hired who are graduates, and there's often a few things that happen that I see repeating. One, they don't have work in progresses. They show finished work. And they may not have much work, but they make sure that what they show is of a high standard. But more importantly, I think they understand the difference between trying to get hired doesn't mean you're showing potential. It's showing that you're close to professional. Two very different things. No one's hiring you based on your potential. So if you can make an asset that looks as close to a asset that exists in a game that you've played, that's what's going to get you a job. Not, oh yeah, like, oh, I put this in just to show I'm kind of working on this, or this isn't finished, but I'm just showing my work in progress. It's like you've committed to completing something, and it's within the realm of they're not that far out from making an asset that can work in a game. And that's even, I've seen people get hired with 2 pieces of work in their portfolio, and then seen someone with like 12 pieces, and it's like you're very far away. You need to actually delete all this and like make some fresh stuff. And even if you only finish 1 or 2 things in the next 6 months, it's going to probably get you hired more than this almost stuff.
Nice. No, thank you. It's great advice. And obviously, I think one thing I want to jump back to actually just really quickly, Dal. Are you? Someone asked this actually really briefly earlier, and I didn't quite capture it. You're working quite internationally now, but do you still consider yourself to be quite UK based, both in your work and in your life, or not? Because I think advice for games industry can be really quite different depending on what part of the world you're in, and you're working for some big
Sure.
US companies, but your roots is in the UK. So I think sometimes it's just nice to explore that element as well of is there something to be said about those 2 different cultures, those 2 different industries?
Yeah, they are very different. I'd say that they are very so I've been living in the US only for about 2.5 years now, almost 3 years.
Hmm.
But I've been working for US companies for a little bit closer to 3 to 4 years. I'm LA based now. It's unlikely I'll probably move back. Like my kids in school here and stuff, so I'm probably going to be here for the foreseeable. What I would say is the advice isn't that different. It's just that I find that even though there is more studios stateside. Um, they're a little bit more focused on AAA, and so the advice more is about like quality and like showing off like really refined quality. Whereas in the UK, I find that quality is important, but fundamentals are probably equally as important, because you need to work in games that like are optimized well. You're working at a good pace. I'm really biased, but I feel like most UK graduates are a lot stronger than US graduates, um, because the courses do really push learn your fundamentals, learn how topology works, learn how to UV correctly, not just like make something really flashy in ZBrush. But yeah, if anyone was interested too, whether or not, I've heard a lot of discussion about like, is it even worth doing a university course in today's climate? It is if you want to work internationally, because you're not going to get a visa unless you have a bachelor's degree. They're not going to give you one. So I'm a big proponent of like, if you are in a university course and you're constantly thinking like, oh, I could have learned this in my bedroom, it's like, maybe you could have, but you may have closed your opportunities to work in different countries, especially with post-Brexit. Can't even just switch over to Europe as easily anymore.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation, I
Yeah, oh
think.
yeah, oh yeah.
But hey, no, that's really great advice, and thanks for really kind of digging into that international aspect as well, because it's rare as a UK organization. It's rare that we speak to someone who actually does have that experience. And really great to hear from you on that one. Next question I've got is I think it's from Hiya Liar. It could be Hiya Leah, who I know. What do I know? Question says, what amount of different variety of character work, so for example, anatomy, cloth work, clothes work, hair, etc., do you recommend to get into the industry now? So you sort of mentioned showing it all, but how does that work really? Are there differences? Are things like that?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is, like before I mentioned, you have to understand someone reviewing your portfolio doesn't believe you. They're highly skeptical of you, and it's your opportunity to persuade them. And there is an opportunity to persuade them in single assets rather than many assets. So when someone's like, oh, you need good cloth work, you might need good anatomy, you might need to understand, you showcase your understanding of like materials. Try and do that in a single asset if possible. And that's not just character art, that's like general 3D art as well. Like if you can showcase an asset that has, like some anatomy showing, some good folds and clothing, different materials like plastic, scratched metal, painted metal, you know, uh fabric again, or and skin. Like, you're kind of like getting a range to help persuade. um I wouldn't do work you're not I wouldn't showcase work unless you're confident in it. Don't throw in hair just to show that you can do hair unless you think the hair is of a good quality. That means if you do hair and it doesn't look like a game, you need to do some more hair.
Mm.
And in the meantime, put a beanie hat on that character. Like, because you have to try and persuade. You're not there to be like, oh yeah, I'm good at this, but this isn't okay. But I'm just showing you, like, this is your this is not a world where people placate to you. This is a world where people need to know your usefulness in profitability. So, and don't do a wide range of here's my style, like here's my super realism, blah blah blah. Try and find a bucket that you feel comfortable with. You'll use your time a little better.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump to the next question. Mr. Hobo87 says, "What do you think? Oh, sorry. Do you think the expectations for new character artists trying to get into the industry are the same as when you were breaking in, whether it's the technical side or the artistic side? And I suppose, if no, what has changed? I suppose it would be interesting to think about as well. Like, what does that look like in 2 years as well? Like, is it shifting even now?"
Yeah, it's definitely different. I think back when I was getting in, it was I had to know a lot of technical things compared to nothing, but it was way more focused on artistic ability. Even now, you don't really see the, like, oh, showcase that you can draw and showcase that you can paint. That was much more of a focus back in the day. Well, because all of our textures were hand painted. There was, that was a transition period. You had to paint your textures in Photoshop flat, and you had to know how to paint. And so now the focus has been a little bit less on artistic flair. So I find that there's a little bit of a necessity to understand technique, and there's a lot of things that you don't have to mess around with as much. Like, things just work. Like, you just press the bake button and it bakes. It wasn't really like that before. You'd have to like break up the assets in like loads of places. So I'd say the technical side of things has become more of a focus for
Mm.
sure. But the quality of art has gone up too. But to counterbalance it, you can find anything you need to learn online. Like, I couldn't just put character art in YouTube in 2007 or 2008. Like, that just wasn't a thing.
But now people put character art in, and boom, into games, interview with Del Walker, let's go.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean. I do know what you mean. Thank you very much. We've had a few questions that really focus on sort of like stylized versus realistic. So I'll go for this one here. Gecko with a pencil asks, "I've heard mixed opinions around this. Would you feel there is more opportunities for character artists going in a realistic direction or a stylized direction?"
Yeah, I think it's the wrong question. I
Mm.
think it's the wrong question because it's very similar to the question, like, what career is better to force your kid to go into? Should they be a mechanic, or, should they go be a dentist? And it's like, you're in a creative industry. What your portfolio is making should be influenced by your aptitude and interest to some degree.
Hmm.
What I would say is, if you make more realistic stuff, there's probably a little bit more opportunity for you to find work in the UK right now, and there will be, purely because those games need more humans often. They usually veer on the AAA side of things, and they usually have a little bit more budget. I'm just generalizing here. Um, but again, the stylized route, there, it's a little bit harder to find talent that is even interested in that on any scale. So it kind of balances itself out. So I don't think people should be like, oh, which should I choose to get hired? I don't think that should be the case. If anything, I'd say you just need to be very good at whichever one you pick and be confident.
I also think there's something to be said, right, for whatever lane you stick to now, and you think I can see this working today in 2024. I can see the room for it. You're gonna be work ready in like 2026, 2027, 2028, and
Yep.
in that amount of time, like something else would have happened in the industry. All of our interests would have shifted. Everyone would be tracing a new fad or a new trend, and like
Yeah.
that, if you were chasing a trend or a fad or an opinion piece from someone else, that might just not land anymore in that new scape. So definitely, like knowing that you wanted to do this the whole time, I think it's kind of crazy important.
Yeah. Yeah. Be confident in your direction because of those reasons.
Absolutely. A YouTube username that I really relate to here, Curious Foodie, asks, "What steps can an early stage artist with only indie experience on their portfolio take to transition their skills and style to showcase and become a AAA talent?" And so I guess there's a massive conversation there about like, right, I'm indie, I'm good at indie, I'm great at indie, I get work in indie, but how do I get work in AAA? How do I do that? What's the barrier? What's stopping me?
Just look at a AAA artist's portfolio and try to emulate it. If you don't know the gap between emulating an asset that you see there, you need to figure out what those are. You need to go online, like, okay, how do I um because there's a little bit of an idea that like, oh, I just need to bend. It's like you might need to relearn. You might need
Mm.
to be like, I'm not actually sure how you make a jacket that looks that good, um or even I've seen a lot of times people make 3D general 3D art, and they're like they've made lots of really cool indie stuff that is stylized and simple, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna try and go for a more realistic approach. And I was like, make sure it's complex. I want to see an asset that has like components to it. I've seen someone get hired off two assets. They had a Vespa and a lawnmower, but this Vespa and lawnmower in their portfolio was so strong, like really, really strong. It was enough. Um, because they often the difference is detail and quality. And so throw your own portfolio away, hypothetically, and be like, what am I going to do to make a AAA portfolio, and start working towards that. And
Cool, beautiful stuff. I love this question here actually. Here Leah slash Higher Liar is back with the question: how many years did it take for you to feel that your work is at an industry standard? And I love this question because we don't talk about it a lot on the chat on this particular YouTube channel, but imposter syndrome is such a horrible thing in this industry. It really holds people back. It really tells people that the thing they created is not good enough constantly. And I think people constantly enter that negative cycle of I didn't get hired, I must not be good enough. I didn't get hired, I must not be good enough. Do you have advice for people trying to overcome that? And in particular as well, yeah, looking at your backlog of work, do you even now, like, do you still kind of have those questions or those doubts or those kind of niggling little feelings like, this isn't a good one?
yeah, I mean, every 3 years it feels like the levels go up quite a lot. But I'm not really sure how to answer the question, because I never felt like I was chasing industry standard. I was just trying to make the best thing I could make every time I made something. I was like, and it was like, can I keep improving this? Can I make it better? I think if I thought that big, it would be a bit too overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, how do I make just a good anatomy study? Let me make another one. Let me make another one. And I think it's more about like what's in front of you. Um, but then again, I have to convey that I did a 3 year degree and I never used a 3D package before I started the degree. In fact, I wasn't even interested in 3D. I was just like 3D, bleh. Like, so I was interested in concept art, and then I got introduced to 3D, and then I really took 3D somewhat seriously 9 months into the course. So I didn't, and then I got hired when I 2 weeks before before I graduated. So it was like 2.5 years before I was hired. But you have to factor in the industry was a bit healthier back then, and there were a little bit more studios that were double A than there were now. But yeah, I think it's dangerous to try and be like, how long does it take? It takes as long as it takes.
As long as it takes. Nice. Thank you very much for answering that question, and thank you for the question. I realised I scrolled well on. I think it was here, Leah, higher, liar. Thank you very
Yeah,
much for your
let's
question.
do. I love these questions. Let's go. Let's go. There's
Yeah, we got more.
more.
We got Mr. Hobo87 is back. I love this one because clearly they've known your work for a while. Mr. Hobo says, showing my age a bit here, but
Oh,
I remember your work from around the Polycount forums back in the day. I don't know that. But
yeah.
do you feel like having a community like that was a benefit to your early work forward slash career? Obviously, I'm a massive advocate for communities, given the fact that I literally run quite a few now.
Yeah.
How did you feel that affects you as an artist?
Yeah. First off, this person's old. If they remember that, they're like, oh, like my old. We're old, and so, yeah, I think there would. I don't know if I would get an industry if it wasn't for community.
Mm.
Like Polycount was like really paramount in helping me, and it wasn't more so. It was because you stopped turning it into me versus the industry thing. It was the focus became on improving. The focus wasn't getting the job. The focus was um, improving, and I think community does that. If everyone's on the wavelength that we're supposed to be helping each other, um, and it was an integral because as well it helps your stamina. The stamina it takes to keep making this stuff. It takes way too long to make 3D stuff. Way too long. It's not like drawing a picture. Um, and the communal energy, it was absolutely integral. Now we have things like Discord and stuff, which replaces forums, but the idea is still the same.
Nice. Thanks for really digging into that. And I think I want to expand on that a little bit as well, which is just, are you, let's say I'm getting into 3D art now. What communities do I join? Should I go to the Polycount forums now in 2024? Are there some sort of communities that you would recommend, especially in your field? Because I can recommend 101 different Discord communities, but they're for me. Anything that you recommend?
I wouldn't recommend any because I don't use them. I don't use them.
Ah,
But like I used them for a long period of time, and then when I got in, then you create like sub communities where you're just like, I don't know. Back in the day, we just switched over to like MSN Messenger. Definitely
yeah.
showing my age now, but there would definitely be like we would just instant message each other and create like mini communities. So the only reason I wouldn't recommend, and by the way, Polycount community is still going, and it's still got incredible industry people. You post in those forums, hey, can you give me some advice? And someone will give you some incredible advice. But I try not to give advice that's 15 years out of date.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, someone actually preempted me in chat. Gold Arch said cue the Intergames Discord plug. But what I would say, join that Discord only to find out what other Discords there are. Use that as a springboard because I like to think of that server as sort of the hotel lobby of a games of an industry, right? Where it's like it's where you start. But you're free to go off into the different rooms. You're free to go off into the various different hallways and things like that. You're going to come back. You're going to come back for directions. You're going to come back to rest your feet, whatever. But by all means, come in and out of that Discord as much as you like, and hopefully we can signpost some other great communities to you if you need that sort of thing. Now, I am catching up on a lot of chatter. You've got really, really great responses. Shout out to the number of people as well who are Dill Montford alumni or current students as well in chat. Quite a few people going through
Nice.
going through their own courses there at the moment. And it's certainly not the first time. And I'm just seeing a few duplicate questions as well, so I'm trying to avoid the duplicate questions. How are you doing for time, by the way? We've hit 6 o'clock. You're happy to keep going if we've got a few more
Yeah,
questions?
it's 10 a.m. here, and so I don't need to do anything till 11. So, you got me as long as you got me.
All
I
right, we're
don't mind.
going. All right, we're going all day. We're going all day. No, we'll take a few more questions just to make sure that I've caught up on chat as much as I can. And let's see. I've got an interesting. Okay, this is an interesting one actually.
Hmm.
Leica would like to sort of follow up with a question that you answered earlier. The bit I'm really going to zoom in on is I have wondered how much benefit you receive by doing a portfolio piece in the style of a company you are applying for. And I guess that the context of the kind of topic there is it worth sometimes developing a piece and developing a portfolio for a specific studio, for a specific project, for a specific thing, and really trying to like get their style right and get that job?
Hmm.
Or again, do you think maybe that's too much?
This is a fantastic question, and I have two pieces to this answer. So, one, making a portfolio piece that is catered to the style of the place you're interviewing you will put you at the top of the list.
Mm.
Objectively, they're going to put you at the top of the list because you're convincing them you can adhere to the style. Um, the danger here is to to imitate rather than emulate. There have been people who have literally made, like Ellie from Last of Us, remade them, the character, and sent it to Naughty Dog for an application, and it's the fastest way to get dismissed. It's the quickest way to get dismissed because you're not making any decisions. You're just facts printing. Like, you need to show that you know how to make artistic decisions. So if you're going to do something in the style of a studio, do not do one for one fan art. I promise you, it seemed like a good idea, but it's not. Instead, if you're like, I really want to work for Riot, or I want to, I loved Arcane, or I like Naughty Dog, or I would work on the next Jedi game, or whatever it is, I really encourage you to make a character that would fit in that world, or assets that would fit in that world. Like, this is so and so's long lost brother, or this is, an NPC. Because then it showcases you know how to adhere to the style, you know how to make artistic decisions that emulates the style without being you having your hand held, and you're not just building off someone else's hard work. You're effectively digitally tracing because you're not making any decisions. You're just copying decisions. The other aspect of that is you need to be very careful when you're tailoring your portfolio to a studio that has a very specific art style, because it can often mean that that's only useful for that place. This is the danger in making a Riot studio portfolio or a Blizzard studio portfolio, where you're like, I really like style. Even when people say I like stylized, you're not really using that word properly, but I understand what you mean, because all games are stylized. The Last of Us is stylized. I promise you, if you 3D scan people and put them in, they wouldn't look like they fit. All games have some form of stylization, but some have an aggressive form of stylization that is so specific to those studios, it can kind of close off your opportunities to other places, because now you've kind of made a decision that you're making an asset for this place, which is why often people will say, go for something a little bit more realistic, because it can apply to many more studios, and has a little bit more like road basically.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I get you. 100% get you. And I love that there's that very appealing sort of sense of it can get you to the top of a queue, but it will not necessarily get you through the door. And recognizing that, I think, is incredibly important. So yeah, thanks for expanding on that one. And thank you so much for the question. I have scrolled down, but thank you for the question. I am. This one's an interesting question, but I feel like Mr. Hobo87 is passionate about it because they asked it twice. They want to know, how often are you asked to take art tests at this point in your career? And I suppose just a little bit of context there as well. Like, tell me, just clarify for me, have art tests changed much as well over the years? Like, is that something that did they exist back, when you were first applying, and they exist loads now? Because I see them come up as a constant topic for people applying for their first jobs.
Yeah, art tests did exist. I'd say they were more prevalent back in the day, because it didn't take as long to make assets. The art test I had for my first game studio, it was to make a character model in one day in the studio. You had to come in at 8 a.m. and you could stay for as long as the lights were on. And at the end of the day, the character had to be finished. And in a way, I preferred that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was probably the hardest test I've ever done in my entire life. Yeah, entire body and all. It was a guy in a jacket. Like he was in a jacket and jeans and like sneakers. And I don't think I've ever, to be honest, looking back on it now, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. Um, and the quality of the work suffered, but it was enough that they could be like, I reckon with another day, he could wrap this up and like, neaten this up and maybe do a little bit more work on the textures. That was my first art test, and I passed the art test. I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing. I almost prefer that art test because art tests now, they ask too much of you. They ask you to do so much work for many weeks. That is necessarily unpaid, etc. Whereas I think the art test I did they paid me for the day technically, and they didn't ask me to stay long. They just was like, hey, if you want to stay extra, that's up to you. If you feel like you want to, but we're gonna pay you between like 9 to 5. But
Interesting.
now I'd say the quality that people are looking for, you wouldn't be able to do much in a day. And I'm a big believer that art tests are kind of going away because they take too long, but also you should have showcased your art skills in your portfolio. Your portfolio should be the art test. I don't do art tests now. Actually, I opted to do an art test recently because I really wanted a role. And I was like talking to the team and I was just like, you know what? Let me get back to you in a week. I think I can showcase exactly what I had in mind. But that was me opting in to do an art test because I just really wanted to showcase my skill set. But art tests really, they kind of aren't really a thing as they used to be.
It's interesting as well because it sounds like at the junior level when you get presented with an art test, it's like, right, this is what you have to do to get to the next stage, where it's very prescriptive. It's do this or you don't move on. But it sounds like at a certain level you're actually having kind of conversations, like it's a little bit more like a negotiation. You've offered to kind of showcase your skills. You kind of offered to convince them, which is quite interesting. Like that's the difference, right? It is a conversation, not a one-sided kind of process.
People look at art tests very differently now too. The culture in the video games industry was very different 15 years ago. Like crunch was normal, unpaid art test normal. Like there's just shit you just couldn't get away with now. And I don't know. I don't want to go down the route of like everybody's soft now because they don't want to be, manipulated or whatever. But things are different now. Yeah, exactly. Things are different now. So art tests are a little less contentious.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for answering that one. Really good of you. Thank you for the question, Mr. Hobo87. Next question coming from Jomir Rule with the Super Saiyan God Goku profile picture says, and I've noticed this come up quite a few times actually in different chats, the keyword art block. So is there a moment where you got art block? And what is your way to get around it? And I suppose art block can come in one of two ways, right? Like you've either got the professional project that you're being paid to do and you've got deadlines, or you've just got that personal like sense of creativity where you just can't make something for yourself anymore. And I don't know, have you had both? Have you had one or the other, etc.?
Yeah. I'm going to be really frank about this question because I hear this question a lot and I think it's a phenomenal question. I love this question. I wish I asked this question when I was a student because I would get very focused on art block. I look at things very differently now. I don't think people should. Actually, let me rephrase that. Many people who are trying to get into the industry, or students, or creative people who are trying to improve, but maybe haven't worked in a professional setting, often work under the frame of motivation. How do I get motivated to do this stuff? Or am I how do I get myself like the gusto to work on it when I'm not in the mood? The reality is, I personally think that that's a terrible way to look at things, and motivation is something you should throw out the window. Motivation is your enemy. The only thing you need to be focused on to get through art block and not feeling unmotivated is just discipline. That doesn't mean you need to just force yourself. I'm not feeling you just need to force yourself. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm saying that there are certain things that you do every day that you kind of don't want to do, but by doing them over a period of time and repeating them and creating a repetition where it becomes normal, you don't need motivation to put on clothes to go outside. You've learned at some point that like this is just something I have to do and I'm okay doing it, or I realize now I have to brush my teeth. This is just because there's not a motivation to be like, am I motivated? It's like you just have to have basic discipline to do it. And that means you might not feel it, but I encourage you to just do 10 minutes that day. If you're like, I'm just not feeling it, I'm just like, that's okay. Just have the discipline to do 10 minutes. If the 10 minutes is literally you just opening up and not looking at anything and just being like, I'm only going to do this bit, and you click a bit and the 10 minutes are up and you're still not feeling it, you did 10 minutes. Eventually, that 10 minutes is going to turn into an hour. You keep doing it every day, it's going to turn into just, you're not going to think about it. People like to do what they're good at. And you get good at something through discipline. So
it's the same thing. It's the same thing you hear about going to the gym. It's the same thing you hear about
correct.
a lot of like
Perfect example.
Yeah, turning something from like I can't quite remember the wording for it. There's a really good Kurzgesagt, this sort of scientifically disciplined YouTube channel that talks about turning things from like a one-off into a programmed behavior in your brain and in your body, where you do it not because you thought to do it, but because it comes naturally to you. And for me, it's opening up, like sitting at my computer and opening up Discord, Slack, Twitter, my emails, like Facebook and YouTube. Like I open up the same things every single time I sit on my computer. I will often then close 3 of those things because I never needed them. But I've got a good habit. And one of those things, Discord, is basically my office now. It's my digital office to open it up. But I've always had the hobby of opening up Discord and sitting in Discord and working in there. Someone, GW42, puts a really wonderful quote from BoJack Horseman: "It gets easier." You know, like it applies to so many things in life. And it's a great answer. Thank you, Del, for really opening up on that one. And thank you for the wonderful question. You had the Goku YouTube profile picture, but I have lost you in chat. I think we're at 6:15. I am going to gently bring it to a close there. A scan of some other questions. There's definitely some great questions, but I feel like we've really, really managed to smash through an incredible breadth of what needed to be talked about here. And so, first off, a huge thank you to everyone in chat. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your engagement. Chat is so chatty. Chat is so alive today.
Yay.
And I love it, and I'm here for it. And thank you so much for being here. If you love this event and you love this talk, please know that Intergames tries to do talks like this on the regular. So keep an eye on the YouTube. Use the link tree in the bottom to see what other chats we do and other things we've got lined up. Consider the Discord server. I won't make you, but I do recommend it. And then thank you to Del. Thank you, Del, for joining us here today on your lovely Los Angeles morning. Where I can hear your service trucks outside.
Oh yeah, those are the garbage trucks. Yeah, they're loud as hell.
And yeah, I can hear LA waking up all around you. So thank you for joining us so much on your morning. Del, if people wanted to, I guess we kind of talked about this before we went live, actually, but if people wanted to kind of keep in touch or pay attention to your work and things like that, or if there's just anything that you want to plug as well, anything that you're personally passionate about, what would those things be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to plug the course again, the Intergames course. Like, if you want to jump on that, gonna be happy to. I'm really hoping that people jump on that, because I'd love to have more one-on-one with artists and help them tailor their portfolios, etc. But yeah, outside of that, I'm going to be using social media a lot more sparingly in the future. But I'm at the Cartel Dell on Twitter and at Dell Walker on Blue Sky. I'm just going to be mainly focused on just posting updates and stuff going forward. But yeah, and feel free to jump on LinkedIn, Dell Walker as well. Like add me there. But yeah, I don't really have anything to plug. This was more of a giving, rather than a taking.
No, no,
So
no, absolutely. Well, I always try and make sure that like every talk, I just give a little opportunity because some people like they're coming on here, they might not have the audience, they might not have, the sort of
yeah, yeah,
the
makes sense.
reputation, and they might have a platform or a project that they're really passionate about. So I just want to make sure that everyone gets that chance. Yes, one last time. Course starts in January, 3 weeks. They're really gorgeous. They're really amazing. I've been lucky enough to be the sort of admin person behind a couple of the concept art courses that we did last year and genuinely loved being on them. I'm not even an artist, but I just found the format really incredible. I found the cohort really engaged, and a lot of those people have gone on to do work that I can sort of celebrate and love since then as well. So genuinely a really great place to network, build a little sort of build your own little cohort, start your own little MSN messaging group. Why not? It's 2024. Who cares? Thank you to everyone in chat. Thank you for all your curiosity and your questions and your engagement. You've all been amazing. That is all from us today. If you have any questions, or again, if you feel like something didn't get answered, get in touch with us at Intergames. You can email us hello@intogames.org, or jump into the Discord. You can ping me, Jonas, or JTTG. You can ping me in chat, and I will jump in and do what I can. Thank you very much, Dell. Thank you very much, chat. We're all done here. Look after yourselves. I'm trying to think when our next event is. We'll hopefully be back tomorrow with a chat about technical design, and we've got a couple of talks coming up in December, all about narrative design as well. So if you're into the writing aspect, check it out. Check it out. All right. Thank you, everyone, and good night once again. Bye bye
Bye.
for now. Bye bye, everyone.